I mean, we work with UBS, with Deutsche Bank, with Fidelity, with Janos Andersen, with a bunch of people that are very, very prominent, and they can move billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on chain at some point in the future. And despite this, this is not incorporated in the token valuation, for example. The second is the ZK story. I personally think ZK is a fundamental technology for crypto, but also for other things in general, coordination using zero knowledge to prove validity of statement. I think you will say it probably somewhere in the interview, but I'll say it too. So of course, this is not investment advice.
Welcome everyone in our next episode of ZK Talks. Today's guest is Marco from ZKsync Foundation. Can you tell us something about yourself at start, please?
Yeah, so my name is Marco. I'm the director of the ZKsync Foundation, and maybe we'll talk about what it is and what it's doing in the course of the conversation. Before this, I was responsible for the business team in Meta Labs, which is the company behind ZKsync, the protocol. I was basically responsible for business development, finance, legal, ops, partner engineering, a couple of other things. And before this, I was the CEO for Asia for a global fund management company called Azimut, with a little bit less than 100 billion in asset globally in various funds and strategies. And my background is in math and economics. I've been a quantitative analyst for a while. So, my crypto work now, it's really an atonement for the past work in finance that was not as interesting and also not as useful, I think.
But it's good to see that ZKsync has such qualified people on the core of the team. But let's move to the basic. For those who doesn't know, can you explain the difference between the ZKsync Foundation and the Matter Labs?
Yes, 100%. And maybe I'll introduce, because at ZKsync we like complicated things. So I introduced a third entity too, which is ZK Nation. So there are two big entities in the ecosystem, and one so two big entities connected with the token and governance, and one entity that is connected with the protocol itself and the technology. So let's start with Meta Labs, which is where everything started. Meta Labs is a development company. They develop software. They were the company behind ZKsync at the beginning, when it was very centralized and when it was proprietary. And they are a technology company. They are one of the many that is working on the core protocol that ZKsync produce, and they are by far the biggest still today. The second entity that is interesting is ZK Nation. So ZK Nation is an Austrian association, basically an ownerless entity, that was the entity that created the token, did all the token work, and is currently responsible for governance. It did the token launch, it did the airdrop, it does today wrap the big delegates. So if you are a delegate on ZKsync, you have protection, legal protection coming from this entity in Austria. And is now helping out coordinating governance. And you all know Rafa, I think he was in your interviews before me. The third entity is the ZKsync Foundation. The ZKsync Foundation is the recipient of one of the very first grants. So ZK Nation coordinated a big grant to the ZKsync Foundation, which is a Cayman entity. Again, it's a foundation, so it's an ownerless entity. We don't have owners, we don't have equity, we don't have shareholders. And our job is to accelerate the adoption of ZKsync, the technology. Our jobs are a couple. So this is the main one. It's the most important one. We do this through business development activities, through supporting PR, relationship in general with marketing and branding agencies, so that the brand of ZKsync is well known. We support it with events, and some of these things are slowly shifting under the responsibility of the DAO, of the governance infrastructure. And this is one of the big items that we really focus on. The second big item that we focus on is the core protocol itself. So the second big responsibility that we have is to help the constant development of the protocol. I would say there are two major things. One is the core protocol development. I mean, we wrote a blog post where we were talking about Airbender, for example. This kind of development are financed by the ZKsync Foundation. And the second is security, probably in reverse order. Security, I would say, is even more important. So security is one of the most important things. I mean, it's a terminal risk, right? So if we screw up on security, probably we shut down. So that's one of the most important things we have to focus on. And then the third, which is a little bit more out of the money and is something that we have started to do and think about, is what I call bootstrapping markets. So in general, when you have a big entity in an ecosystem, like it could be us, and it could be any other entity. I mean, we don't have the monopoly on this at all. You know, we can try to push a market that will appear naturally, but over a long period of time to come faster. So I make some example. One example is what we did like a few weeks ago. So we think it's useful to have high liquidity on the ZK token, also on Ethereum layer 1, and not just on ZKsync, and not just on Binance and Bybit and decentralized exchanges. And so we deployed a bunch of ZK in a liquidity pool. So nothing that is rocket science, but you know, if normal people would have done it, you have a small amount of liquidity. If you have small liquidity, you have high slippage. If you have high slippage, people don't use it. There's no trading fee. Nobody puts more liquidity in. And you may be stuck in this equilibrium for a long period of time where the experience is crap and nobody's using it. And so there's no point in providing liquidity. Because we have, you know, a bigger amount of token, we can just bring the liquidity up to a point that is already quite nice from the start. So if it's nice to trade on layer 1, then people trade on layer 1. This creates fees. And so LPs can provide liquidity. And eventually we may reach a point in which we are not needed anymore and we may take this money out. This is an example. Another example we are starting to think about is, you know, smart contract insurance. This is something that typically don't happen by chance. It did on Ethereum, but I think pretty much only there. You know, smart contract insurance is a catch-22. As a normal DeFi user, if nobody is offering me, I'm definitely not setting this up because I don't know how to do it. That's not my job. I'm a user, potentially a client, a buyer of the product. And as an insurance, if I don't see demand, I don't deploy. And you know, there's a lot of other opportunities for them to kind of do their own work. So one thing we can do is we can go to insurance company, reinsure them cheaply, so that they have, but only on condition that they deploy this insurance risk onto ZKsync. And so it's up to them. They can make a little bit more money by being on ZKsync, or they can not be on ZKsync. And if they choose to be on ZKsync, then hopefully there are offering. Users that are interested will buy it. And eventually, maybe it's organically good for the insurance to stay on ZKsync long term without our support. And so our reinsurance program can either go to normal market rates so that we are compensated properly for the risk we are taking, or we just step away. Because again, that's not really our job. We are not, you know, we are not a reinsurer. So we can be for a while, and we are not a liquidity provider. We are none of these things. So it's not really our job is to use the capital to accelerate the growth of the ZKsync ecosystem as much as we can. I don't know if it was clear and if you want to deeply do what you do.
I think it was very clear and sounds really interesting. Let's talk about some of the updates regarding the ZKsync ecosystem. What category in the ecosystem do you think has shown the most innovation in 2025? Was it DeFi, GameFi? Which one?
I think quite a few. So, so the DeFi is always very interesting. There's a lot of innovation coming. There's you know, all of this kind of innovation around the high performance exchanges coming on chain is very, very interesting to me. InfoFi is very interesting too. I think that's a lot of like interesting things that could start to happen, and that's a place where ZKsync can shine because, you know, when you have information, the topic of privacy becomes very important. And so, yes, you know, if it's something like Kaito, which I think would fall more or less in the same place, then it doesn't matter. You actually want to show that you are the one with 1 million followers on Twitter. But if there is other form of information that are used and monetized, they, you know, some of it may need to be, it would be better if it remains private. And again, as you know, privacy with ZK is very interesting, and because of our architecture, verifying zero knowledge proof on ZKsync is much cheaper than almost all the competitors. So this could be a nice development down the line. And the other is all the work that is happening around interoperability and abstraction. So today, as you know, the the offering of services for real world application on chain is poor, and is poor for many reasons, but I think one of them is fragmentation. And with the Elastic Network, the rollup cluster, we are totally responsible in part for it, right? So we have a chunk of chains that are there. And so a lot of innovation will come from this interoperability plus abstraction innovation that I think is going to be very, very powerful. And so we'll see, but I think a lot of interesting things.
I saw regarding the InfoFi that actually GainLayer is building Rally on chain.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm pretty hyped that it's built on ZKsync. So I'm already watching and trying to dive deeper into it. Regarding the tech update, is there anything you want to highlight regarding ZKsync? Are there a bunch of new updates coming in upcoming months?
Yeah, and I mean, some of these information are already kind of disseminated here and there, but I'll try to kind of condense them into one. I think there are three big updates. I would say ZKsync over the next 3 to 4 months, say between now and year end, will go almost through a full kind of number upgrade, right? So when you go from version 10 to version 11 in the operating system. So there is three big topics that are being updated, and updated in a way that is much, much better than before. So one is the virtual machine, what we call ZKsync OS. So ZKsync OS is the new infrastructure for the smart contract writing, for the execution of the code. And we move from the old version that was upgraded to add Ethereum EVM equivalents to a system in which instead, eventually, developer will be able to use any programming language or many programming language to develop their smart contracts. So this we think is very, very powerful. In the short term, the more interesting thing is that also it's a completely new architecture, which is much more efficient. So cost and speed will go down very, very much. So a cost now of making a zero knowledge proof using ZKOS will be much less than 1 cent. So this, I think, is pretty cool because, as you know, one of the key advantages of a ZK rollup is that we do produce proof of validity. And one of the disadvantages is that this costs a little bit of money as compared to, say, an optimistic rollup that has a much weaker guarantees, but is free unless you have a challenge. So this is gonna, make us protect the benefit. So it will still be proof. The proof will still be there, but now will be very, very cheap, almost infinitesimal. So this is, I think, big update, very, very important. And the first chain will start to migrate to ZKOS very soon, like in the order of 1 to 2 months. The second big update is Airbender. Airbender is the new prover, and you saw the announcement probably a month and a half, 2 months ago. It's live on testnet. People can already using it, and the benchmarks that are coming out today are amazing, right? So today we can do a full proof for a block in less than 1 second, which is awesome. No, and I mean, it's in general is amazing. Like 2-3 years ago when we launched, it was taking 20 hours to make a block. And now the current block time is around 3-4 hours, which is much better than a week, but still not cool as it should be. Now at 0 point something second, it's awesome. No, and you get very, very close to real-time proving. From practical purposes, nobody minds to wait less than a second to do stuff. No, it's very, very cool. And this has a lot of downstream consequences, like for intents, this means much less cost of capital, which then means that intent will shift some of their volume onto things like ZKsync. This means finality is very fast, so deposit withdrawal from centralized exchanges is going to be very fast, which means arbitrage can be more frequent, which means more transaction, more volume, etc., etc. So all of these are very, very nice. And the third is Gateway. So Gateway, it's a part of infrastructure that has already been running for a while, and all of the chain in the Elastic Network are already connected to it. And Gateway has a kind of like official job. The official job is to take a bunch of proofs and compute a new proof. And this new proof has properties that make it cheaper, basically. So that's cool. So before going to Ethereum is cheaper, and this means that also we can scale limitlessly. So that's the original part. But the second use of gateway is that, coupled with the very fast Airbender, can be used as a messaging system, as a general messaging system that allow the Elastic Network to interoperate in a super efficient way. So this is awesome because it solves one of the problems that I was mentioning before. So fragmentation is a big issue. You don't want to switch network. You don't want to switch wallet. You don't want to have 10 different addresses on 10 different chains. You don't want to send transaction, a bridge transaction shouldn't be like it is today, where I send money to someone and then I trust that at some point they will send it to me on chain B. This is really not very, very efficient. Imagine a world that combining Airbender plus gateway, you instead have a single wallet, a single address. You live somewhere in any of the Elastic Network, and you can use the infrastructure everywhere else. So this is awesome because from the user perspective, I mean, much better UX. No, you don't have to figure out a lot of stuff. You don't need, you don't lose the stuff out into a million chain, and you don't have the bridge risk, which is a risk and is annoyance and is time waste and is money, etc. From the developer perspective, it means though that the Elastic Network now starts to scale kind of in an additive way rather than in a subtractive way. So some developer that we speak to, for example, tell us, oh, we consider OP Stack because there is Base and we would like to get onto some of their user. And that's great. If you deploy on Base, sure, that's true. But if you deploy another chain on the Elastic, on the OP Stack, really you are assuming that you can then go and get some user from Base to you. So you can do this on the Elastic Network too. You can do this on Ethereum. You can do this everywhere there is no Base. So really being on the OP Stack doesn't help you at all. That's not a great choice. That's what I call a non-additive partnership. This doesn't create network effect. If you are on the Elastic Network instead, as long as you do something that is complementary to something else, then you benefit from their user too. So for example, if you do a financial application that benefit from a social network, you can then immediately get a lot of the user from Lens to you without asking permission to Lens, without building complex infrastructure because you rely on the universal interoperability from ZKsync, and without imposing on your user a lot of complications. So this is going to be, I think, awesome because from the developer perspective, it means you get this much bigger market and you get a bigger opportunity to integrate stuff. So in terms of like set of mind is imagine you have composability, which we know is super cool on Ethereum within a chain. Now you have composability across chains. And that I think it's really, really nice.
Yeah, this is very exciting, and to be honest, I can't wait when I see everything fully working, and I see thousands, not first hundreds of new chains on ZKsync Elastic Network, or also app chains will start popping out. But every app can have its own chain simply and have the shared liquidity across the whole Elastic Network. So yeah, I'm definitely hyped about this one, and can't wait to that moment, to be honest. All right. Yeah. Basically, I wanted to ask how will ZKsync improve users and developers' experience in the coming months, but you already answered this because you said.
Yeah. And maybe to add like few words. So to summarize, from the user perspective is really improvement around UX, right? So simplifying the entire infrastructure such that you now interact with the Elastic Network and everything that is on it from a single place. So if you couple this, there's other products, right, that are being innovated. There is SSO, there is the native smart contract, smart account, the smart addresses that we implement. So through all of these things, the user will have an experience that is like the old school Ethereum experience, where you are on ETH, and when the gas was at 1, then everything was cheap, everything is available, everything is composable, everything is quite simple. Once you go through the process of installing MetaMask and figuring that out, then there's not much more you need to do. So we are bringing this back to Ethereum, which I think it's very cool, through the Elastic Network. From the point of view of developers, instead, it will, in my opinion, be really what is enabled by being able to compose your infrastructure with stuff that is on other chains, and how much innovation and growth this can create.
Yeah, makes sense. Anyway, let's move a little bit to the governance. Also with you, there are some new proposals, including the ZK stacking. What is your thoughts about that?
So I think very cool. So as you saw, like we started to be much more active in governance. Again, another hopefully thing that help the growth of ZKsync. But this proposal came from the community, which is awesome. I think so. We all know decentralization. It's one of the key, most important component, of our roadmap going forward. In order to have efficient, effective, useful decentralization, you need staking and staking needs to provide some specific use case like economic security, fast finality. There's a lot of things that you can enable with staking. And starting to test the infrastructure out, I think it's a great idea. So there is the core component of staking. So why are you staking and how does this interact with the core protocol, which is being developed right now. But then there is the out of core component, which is what is being tested with this proposal, if I understood it correctly, which is how do I stake? How do I unstake? What's the yield? Starting to test all of these parameters to make sure that they provide a correct infrastructure, auditing everything, etc. It's also quite prudent proposal. It has locks. There is a maximum amount that can go into the staking contract. There is a maximum amount of yield that can be paid out. So excited to see the outcome of this experiment, and exactly what is the yield that is demanded, how many people take this over, how fast. And based on this information, we will know how important and urgent this is. And so we can then, reprioritize maybe some of the core development that we are sponsoring.
Interesting. So if the ZK stacking will have a lot of noise and will succeed, let's say that people will stack really quick their ZK, then maybe we can move quicker to the other version of the staking where we can actually have the fees generated on the sequencer or gateway and so on. Or
Yeah, definitely. So I think if in general, like if the staking discussion and the staking experiment works very, very well, and there's a clear need to prioritize it, we will definitely need to prioritize it. There's it's a little bit the issue of a general purpose infrastructure, like a general blockchain, as compared to say a single product, where you typically have less number of things to optimize for. In our case, there is a lot of stuff, and some protocol need A, some protocol need B, something need XYZ, etc. So if the community gives us the feedback that, hey, this is like among the top 1 or 2 priority because the entire staking gets immediately filled up and people are accepting not a very, very high yield for it. And yeah, then this needs to go higher in the priorities.
great to hear. There is also another proposal, is the community activation pilot program. Um, what do you think about it? Do you think that we need something like that? Because
Yeah,
from my
absolutely.
perspective, as a community member, everyone can choose where he is or where she is good at, and simply write a proposal, ask the funding, and say, "Yeah, I will do this for this amount." From my side, it's a great idea.
Yeah, and so this is a proposal we made as foundation. So was made by one of our team members. So we think it's a good idea. Hopefully, let's see the community, how it's gonna use it. And but yeah, absolutely. So I think a blockchain is more than just the technology behind it. It's the technology plus the adoption, user and developer, plus the community. And it's very important, and probably, and I don't know if you disagree, but it's something that as ZKsync, we have to accept that we have done a job that is less good than others in making sure that the brand and the awareness is out there as much as it should be. So very often I go into call with people that are very informed, and when I tell them, hey, by the way, you like the RWA narrative, I mean, we are 3, 4, 5 times larger than number 3 if we exclude Ethereum, which is kind of icon league on its own. But in the RWA space, we are X many times larger than everybody else. And sometimes even well-informed people, they are not really aware. So one thing I would really like to see from this is that this kind of situation starts to happen less and less and less. The other is ZK. So I think ZKsync is very well known in the ZK space. Pretty much everyone in crypto that think about ZK knows us, and Starkware and few more. But recently there are other projects like ZKsync and Risk Zero and others that took also a lot of visibility, and super smart people and good people. Actually, we know them personally. But in terms of adoption, there's really no comparison. If you look at L2Beat, that has a ranking of ZK teams, on usage, on TVL, on blah, blah, like pretty much on every metric, we are much, much bigger than these players that instead have similar visibility. So again, I would really like the community to go out there and make sure that the world is aware that, yes, they are very smart and they are doing very cool stuff, but Airbender is faster, and we have more TVL, and we have been around for longer, and we have done much more transaction. And so if they're cool, which they are, we are cooler. That's, I think, the point that we need to get out as a community and fight for. And
Yeah,
so I think it's a great idea.
I really, really like it. As we know, ZKsync era is also part of the Elastic Network ecosystem. How do you think that ZKsync era can keep its relevance in the ecosystem comparing to other growing chains that are currently gaining the popularity? Are there any plans on this?
Yeah, so I mean, the way we are thinking about the era today is maybe, the role is threefold. Well, first of all, I want to say era, like the rest of the ZKsync core protocol, belongs to the community. So the community can start to deploy stuff, use it for whatever, and if this thing achieve product market fit, that's potentially one answer. But the way we are thinking about it is that ERA is the gateway to enter into the Elastic Network. So the analogy is a little bit like, say, the United States of 100 years ago, where if you're an Italian immigrant, you end up in New York first, stay there a little bit, and then you figure out. And maybe you go to Texas, maybe you go to California, maybe you go to Utah, whatever. Right? But you start from there. So this could be one role of ERA. Why? Because ERA is old, and we connected it to everything. So it has all the centralized exchanges, it has all the institutional custodians, it has all the oracles, it has everything that is needed to do this role. The second is a capital market hub for the Elastic Network. So as you say, there is a lot of chains that are gaining a lot of traction, Abstract, Sophon, Lens, which is fantastic. That's the point, I think, that we wanted. No, eventually, there is a universe in which ERA disappears completely, is not needed anymore. But these entities are really focusing on their own specialized, specific go-to-market, and I think they will benefit a lot by having a capital market hub within the Elastic Network that can provide lending for the entire infrastructure, trading for some of the infrastructure. Again, some of the institutional services like institutional custody and so on and so forth. The third is experimentation. So one thing we advise a lot to developers is, ERA is equivalent to any of the ZK chain. So, if you already decided that you want your own chain, then sure, build it. But one other thing you can do is you can deploy everything on ERA, get to a critical mass that justifies having your own chain, and then migrate. And that could be an easier path, into getting to your chain. Because the chains are equivalent, it's literally copy, paste, redeploy, spend, a very small amount in gas fees, and then move on, with your life. And especially with the very fast interoperability, that migration of user and assets will also be very, very fast and cheap. So these, I think, are the opportunities that ERA has. And then, to be honest, it's like TBD. Like, we can experiment with a lot of things on ERA. And maybe we can change some of its core component and characteristics down the line to see, like, to, for example, try some of the new technology that we are going to build in the future. We try it on ERA first so that we can prove to all the other ZK chain, existing or potential, that this is a cool idea and they may consider it too.
Yeah, that's really interesting, to be honest. So we'll watch it. We'll watch where we are heading with the era and what's testing there and so on. All right. I have to ask you. This is something that everyone needs to know. Is the future looking good for the ZK token?
So I think you will say it probably somewhere in the interview, but I'll say it too. So of course this is not investment advice, but um, I think so, right? Why? Because well, basically, I think the ZK token is undervalued as compared to many of its peers. So some of the things I mentioned before, no, there are LWA focused projects with a valuation that is much higher than ZK, despite having less traction on key metrics like TVL or adoption from large players. I mean, we work with UBS, with Deutsche Bank, with Fidelity, with Janos Andersen, with a bunch of people that are very, very prominent and they can move billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on chain at some point in the future. And despite this, this is not incorporated in the token valuation, for example. The second is the ZK story. I personally think ZK is a fundamental technology for crypto, but also for other things in general. Coordination using zero knowledge to prove validity of statement, protecting privacy is going to be essential. This is another big pillar that we are kind of very strong in. And as I was saying before, no, much stronger than, although people think that we are strong, they should think that we are stronger, because when you look at the metrics, we are much better than other players who again achieve the valuation that are in a similar ballpark than us. Third big pillar is privacy. To the best of my knowledge, Prividium is the only solution that is live with assets, with trading, with users that allow privacy on chain. I mean, there's a lot of super cool research from very smart people. There's a lot of a little bit of hand wavy kind of cluster or corporation type conversation that I personally don't believe too much in, because we saw this happening already a couple of times with Corda, with Hyperledger, even with Libra, right? So we saw these things, they don't really work, the consortium, but still they claim some form of privacy, although it's not completely true. But again, I don't see a lot of action happening. I don't see real user there. Gravity has privacy and is live. The Deutsche chain with Memento ZK chain is live and is building up. It's a bank, so it's moving slowly, but it's moving in the right direction. So to the best of my knowledge, this is very cool. And again, we are all talking about enterprise adoption. Enterprises will not adopt anything, will not be allowed to, no matter whether they like it or not, to adopt anything that doesn't have privacy. So at the moment, like if you are a big bank, you can explore whatever you want, but the only thing you can use now, it's our tech. And this is not incorporated, I think, in the valuation of ZKsync yet. And we started when everybody was saying it was not a good idea 2 years ago, not to talk about enterprises. And we have been lucky because with the change in government in the US, we moved from a headwind to a tailwind. And now there are I think we have conversation with over 30 financial institutions at the moment live on Prividium and usage of joining the Elastic network with their own chain. And this is going to be very, very interesting, very sexy, because these big entities come with millions, tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of users. And if you have 100 million weekly active user, that's 120 TPS. And if you have 5 chains, that's like 5, 6, 7, 100 TPS. That's more than all the rollup combined today. But even more, if you are in Singapore, where I live, you have banking secrecy. So if you are a big bank that have an office in Singapore, you need your chain here. And in Hong Kong, you need another one. And in the US, you need another one. If you are, again, a bank and you have an investment banking arm and a wealth management arm, you likely need 2 chains again. So the number of chains, I think you said it at the beginning, there will be hundreds for sure. If this structure works, which we are about to prove, like in the next 2 to 3 months, everything is going to be live and people will see, I can launch my chain, I can have full interoperability with the rest of the system, and it's very fast and very cheap because of Airbender, and it's privacy preserving via Prividium. So then there you go, right? And so it's not impossible that you have one bank, one of these global bank with 100 subsidiaries that has alone 200-300 chain. because they have multiple offices, they have multiple divisions, and they all need their own privacy infrastructure. So this is not reflected in the token price. None of these three big things that I mentioned. And this, I didn't even mention, but I should, all the good stuff that the rest of the Elastic network is doing. So Lens is revolutionary. They are doing something very cool, and I think they're gonna grow very much, in the future. Abstract is already showing, and Sophon too, that their go-to-market strategy are different, but are both very, very interesting and are gaining traction. They're gaining activity, they're gaining user, they're getting very interesting application being developed on. The centralized exchanges partnership, we have also Chronos, Union, WonderFi, Ripio. So these players are in the right part of the world for crypto adoption. Like Union is in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is 1 billion people. Ripio is in Latin America. It's the largest player in the area. Latin America has 700-800 million people. We are working to try to find partnerships in Africa too. Once we have this, we have a global payment network in the global south that is one scale of magnitude more efficient than the one in the north. And this is awesome because, if you're in America, it's great if you can get payments on chain, right? But you don't really need it. You have very fast payment. If you are in Europe, you have SEPA, free payments across 400 million people. They are almost instantaneous. Places like Singapore, Hong Kong, like in the developed world, it's cool to have payments on chain because they have a bunch of properties that are nice and the credible neutrality, etc. It can be cheaper. But where is very cool is in Philippines, because if you do remittance, or in Mexico, look at Bitso, right? So in these places where you end up paying 5, 6, 7, 10% in fees, if you try to send money from Philippines to Indonesia, you end up paying double-digit percentages of fees. You move this payment on chain and the fees go down to 2 cents. And this is awesome. And maybe the payments are smaller. It's not Goldman Sachs sending $1 trillion to Morgan Stanley, but it's 1 billion people sending a ton of money to each other. This stuff ends up on chain. I think it's awesome. And then I stop. I'm happy I get excited about these things, but because this, I think, is where crypto should go.
Yeah, but don't worry, I'm excited too. It was great. I love it. I really love it. Also, not a financial advice, but this is definitely not priced in. Anyway, I think you told me everything I needed to know. But is there anything else you would like to say before we close this out? Maybe where is the foundation investing or something like that? ZKsync Foundation.
Yeah, where we are investing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are trying to make returns, first of all, like an endowment, like a university type endowment. We are trying to make return to make the foundation as long-term as possible. And the ideal scenario I think, for foundations like Crypto Foundation should be that eventually they reach a steady state where they reinvest in their ecosystem only the income that they're making. And if you achieve this, then you achieve perpetuity. Now, this becomes an entity that can constantly support the ecosystem. An example is, they now achieve much more than this, but it's like the big American endowment, like Harvard or Yale, that have so much money now that with a portion of the income that they make, they can fully sustain the entire infrastructure. And now, basically, that infrastructure will be live forever. And like we saw recently, yes, the government can remove funding and you can have a big fight, blah, blah, but at the end of the day, they don't really need it because they have 30 billion in the endowment that, they can just pay for it if they don't get support from the central government. So I think this is one of the key things. But at this stage, it's really secondary. So we are not really investing in treasury, in global bonds, in all these things. So we are now at an initial phase, which is a bootstrapping phase. And I think today the most important thing is to make sure that the ZKsync ecosystem exists and is strong. So almost all our capital that we have invested, we are investing it in the ecosystem itself. Another kind of big thing that I think crypto has done not very well is that in order to go to market and to grow, many projects are doing, no KPI. They're throwing money to people to basically come and say that they do stuff, right? So no names, but we all know who are the biggest offender in this space. And I think eventually this doesn't really achieve a huge amount of outcome. We prefer much more to invest in the ecosystem. So this is how we use the investment power, mostly as a way to get people, one, joining the ecosystem, but two, also strong. So we may help them be a core investor so that it's easier for them to fundraise from other VCs and get to the point that they need to be to further growth. And we can shorten this period, from like it takes 6 months to do a fundraise with our help because we come in and we already commit to something. It's easier for them to convince others, and maybe they can compress this to only 1 or 2 months. So they have 4 more months to go to market, which is great for us. So this is what we have been trying to focus on, and until further notice, for I think the next few years, this will be the core of our interest.
Yes, that sounds good. All right. Yeah, I think now it's completed. Thank you really for your time, and it was very informative. Thank you.
Pleasure. This was fun, and happy to do this more often. Or yeah, I mean, I think very happy to do these kind of things as often as you think it's useful or interesting.
Awesome. Thank you.